Webster, celebrating his Bachen heritage, a heritage he shares with one of the most flamboyant men in the world.
Down the generations, the magnetism of Manhattan has drawn to her welcoming breast those millions of immigrants who came in search of a better world. Among them, early this century, Bertie Forbes, a poor Scots boy who was to have a profound influence on my own career. His ambition? To run his own business magazine. Today, that prestigious journal called Forbes is owned by his son Malcolm, once tipped as a future president of the United States and one of the richest men in the land. Malcolm, who has kept up our family friendship, expanded the business from publishing to vast areas of land, an island in the South Pacific, a palace in Tangier, chateau in France. He balloons across the skies, yes, and recently, as a divorcee, he gained the heart of Elizabeth Taylor as well.
Good friend's office called. They're going to arrive on Friday by helicopter around 4:30 and leave Sunday morning. He's got to get back to Paris.
Okay, but
it's in the nature of men to display the lady of their life on the office desk, but few can afford even to own a Rubens or a Van Gogh, far less the luxury of bringing them to the office wall. Yet, that's what you find at the headquarters of the Forbes empire on Fifth Avenue, where Malcolm reigns like a king, surrounded by his acquisitions which range from the largest collection of Fabergé eggs in the world to Abraham Lincoln's Lum hat and the opera glasses which fell from his hands at the moment of his assassination in a Washington theater. All this from a humble cottage in Bachen, to which his late father came home every 2 years to entertain the parish. Now, in his private Boeing, Malcolm is flying back to revive that picnic. My first connection with all this was the fact that my great-grandfather, Gavin Gregg, the playwright and folk song collector, was also the local headmaster who gave Bertie Forbes all the schooling he ever had. Bertie idolized his old dominie, and when thoughts were turning to the revival of his father's picnic, Malcolm asked me to help. I contacted local parents, and here on one of the rare days of summer, and in a silage park which Farmer Hamish MacDonald had cut just that week, the folk of the parish turned out, as they had done in bygone days, to welcome home a famous son from America. It was Malcolm's first visit in half a century.
We sing the song of welcome, we're glad that you are here. We've gathered to meet you from the parish of your dear. We hope you will enjoy yourself, that's all we want to say, on this Whitehall picnic day. Hey, on this Whitehall picnic day. Hey!
literally 50 years ago, in 1937, was the last time that my brothers and I participated in the races at the picnics. Every other year, from the time I was 7 years old, we used to come back to Scotland. My father not only never forgot his roots, he was very proud of his roots, and he thoroughly enjoyed coming back. He looked forward to it. It was one of the more meaningful things in his life. And
Well did I remember those visits of Bertie the father. In the 30s, we had never set eyes on a real millionaire at a time when a millionaire was something. But back here, he exchanged the glitter of New York for the glare of Buchan. The veneer of opulence peeled away, and he was completely at home again. For Malcolm, too, this was beginning to have a strangely familiar echo. These were real people in a real world, and he sensed the affinity. Could all the caviar on earth taste better than a mince pie and a cup of tea on a fine day in Buchan, shared with plain, friendly folk, the kind of folk his ancestors were, deep in his heart and within his own genes, the kind of man he was himself.
I'm the referee. I declare the winners this team.
From those earlier picnics, Aberdeenshire has been through the boom of North Sea oil, compounding normal changes. Yet, reassuringly, so much remains the same. Buchan folk are hard to impress. But they were impressed in the 30s when Bertie brought us the magic of the cine camera. This was Hollywood in the How of Whitehill. And there he is in 1934, enjoying his own picnic, handing out prizes and joining a formidable line of ladies for the same plain fare. As he munches his mince pie, who's that lady to the right of him? Well, if it isn't my own granny, eldest daughter of his beloved Dominie Gavin Gregg. Malcolm, last time that you and I met here, I was in the 30s. I was a small boy and you were a teenager. How does it feel to be back here now after all these years, 50 years?
Well, I tell you, not having been here for 50 years, it's a very funny feeling to see, like those races we just watched and so forth, that this was a very vivid part of my memory as growing up, and it was, as I say, a highlight of my father's life. And it's kind of fun to see people that are second cousins and that were all part of our heritage. And for my own children, it's the first time they've seen it, and for my grandchild, one of the grandchildren, to be here. It just, you know, life is a series of sequences, and memory, you don't think about it when you're growing up, and when you get older and you're running out of time, you begin to realize what an embracing thing a family connection is, and to go home to your roots is a very moving experience. And I just want now my children to develop the same kind of feelings and caring that my father always had for from whence he sprang. It just meant so much in his life, and let's face it, he meant a great deal in mine. So it is kind of out of respect, affection, and regard for his memory and what was important to him. And I find it's a great, wonderful feeling to continue a tradition that just listen to the laughter, listen to the fun, and that he's absolutely loving this day.
Yes, yeah.
And therefore, my sons and I have agreed we'll continue the tradition.
Sure, that's great. That's marvellous. I mean, you must marvel at the fact that your dad, out of straitened circumstances here, you know, in fact, made it all the way to New York and made his mark as well as his money there from this kind of beginning.
Certainly I and my children are very glad he did.
Right, did exactly. If he's looking down on us today, any idea the kind of the things he might be saying about us?
Well, I think he's doubtless pleased, and he'd say, now that's the way money should be sent, son. That's the way it should be spent.
I always felt Bertie's interest in me as a boy was by way of repaying a debt he felt he owed to Gavin Gregg. He would encourage me into journalism, not that I needed much encouraging, and I used to sit spellbound by tales of his famous friends, John D. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Woolworth. He was delighted when I became a reporter in 1948. Nearly 40 years later, I'm still in journalism, nowadays keying into the computer my column in the Glasgow Herald. In the 60s, I had travelled far and wide for the Scottish Daily Express, having trained on the Aberdeen Press and Journal, and before that on the Turriff and District Advertiser, where, believe it or not, I became the acting editor at the age of 16. Bertie Forbes may have approved of my journalism, but much less delighted was my father, John Webster, the Buchan auctioneer, who, when he wasn't at his livestock sales, was tending his own few acres with an unspeakable devotion, furrow upon furrow of virgin soil. We may have been strangers, my dad and I, but you couldn't but admire the solid worth of the man, his judgment and his great good humour. There he was, as I came home from school, hard at work as ever.
Oh, lassie, oh. Well, Loon. That's my paperist.
Aye, Dad.
Tell your mother I'll be working as long as there's left. I'll be dealing with a piece.
Aye, I'll tell her.
Now, well, away I go home, man.
The rhythms and rotations of the land may have swayed my father, but the rhythms of my mother's life were of another sort. Though born and brought up on a farm, she was never completely at home in the role of the farmer's wife. We had lived down in the village of Maud before my father took on his own bit land, and there she enjoyed her neighbours. But in the lonely kitchen, she dreamed dreams of another world, and turned up the wireless to commune with Wojak or Tchaikovsky, Ketelby or Cole Porter, learning many an operatic score by heart without ever having seen an opera in her life. My leanings were more in the direction of my mother, who'd hardly read a book, but could write letters in the most beautiful hand, full of colour and description.
Hello, Mum. Is there a fly cup?
Aye, I was just pouring into myself, and there's a new baked scone and treacle if you want. But like a day, did you have the school?
Nay, bad. Oh, Jock Elrod got the strap.
What for?
Miss Morrison asked us what we wanted to be when we left the school.
What did Joke say?
He said he wanted to be a dirty buddy.
That was awful cheeky. Did she ask you what you wanted to be?
Aye.
And what did you say?
Said I wanted to be a reporter.
A reporter? On the Press and Journal, you mean?
Aye.
What put that idea in your head?
I dunno ken, I've just wanted to be a reporter.
Well, if that's what you want, my loon, I'm all for folk doing what they want in this world. What's the use of Dad trying to make you a farmer if you're not cut out for it?
What did you want to be when you were a wee quine, Mum?
You would laugh if I told you.
Oh, Mum, I wouldn't laugh, honest.
Well, I wanted to be a dancer.
What kind of a dancer?
Maybe a ballet dancer or a Ginger Rogers or something like that.
And what why did you know?
It's not very easy to be a dancer in Buchan.
Were you a good dancer, Mum?
I might have been nae bad. Will you be my Fred Astaire? If Dad were to come in now, he would say we were a pair of field guides. You would not understand, your Dad. Would not understand.
Away from the fields, my father was most at home in his beloved sail ring at Maudmart, where he reigned supreme for more than 40 years, the ringmaster in a weekly circus through which the prime beef of Aberdeenshire found its way to the nation. The farmers who came to trade their cattle were the solid sons of the soil, noble faces hewn from generations of toil, fresh from the lonely furrow and clustered now in a babel of fellowship. These were my father's folk. Some he had helped to become their own masters, guiding, advising, cajoling them to take the step from being a farm servant to owning their own few acres. For independence was in the marrow of the Buchan bone.
50, 20, 5, 50, 450, 450 off 10, 1, 2, 22, 5, 25, 50, I leave down, 44, 6, 46, I am 6 down, Ariania Golden, I am 446 off 10, I am 600 Silowisa, 445, Folly, Adiel.
This was John Webster's place of work, the rostrum, his reference point of a life that pulsated with the bustle of the byre, the free intercourse of people who called a spade a bloody shovel and would not have taken all the perfumes of Paris in exchange for the healthy odours of a dozen skittery coos. A day at the mart worked up an appetite and a drouth, and when the gates had clanged on the last of the Buchan beasts, farm bellies went ben the house for a well-stacked plate of mince and tatties from Beatrice Carno. It was a chance to compare prices, exchange the news of the day. Aye, and damn it, man, we'd been needing the war a dram.
And he in the houses. So he got his neighbour, he had a house. And the neighbour, he says, I'll give you a house, and I'll give you the grunty.
And with the lubrication of the second and third drams, just to put away the taste of the first one, you understand, the tongues would loosen and the rich and rolling dialect of Buchan came cascading like the dancing waters of the Yugi and Spate from the heights of Bonnie Dam. It's still the spoken word of the rural northeast, despite all the assaults of alien forces. But what price the survival of that expressive tongue? A famous daughter of New Deer is Flo Campbell, now the poetess Flora Gary.
First poem I ever wrote. Benegok, the hill of the cuckoo. It was just a skelp of the Muggle Firth, as kleiter a roch gran. Van grandfather's father broke it in for the header and the fun. Grandfather's clicket barn and bear, bracht water to the close. Pat veildijks ben the bare brave face, and I keert road till the moss. But where father soter to the yard and skip it am a bees, and keep it fancy dukes and doos, it warna muckle ease. He bocht all wisn't horse and kai, and scrimpet muck and seed, saying, Clocheren we a creichle host, he dwyned awa. Indeed.
That was splendid. Language has always been a special interest of yours, Flora. Do you feel that the language itself is going to survive this northeast tongue of ours?
I don't think it can survive in its present form. I'm afraid that it'll become, I might use the word polarized. You'll have a small academic group studying it in depth. On the other hand, you have the rank and file, ordinary people, and with them it'll get watered down. Words will get lost, idiom will get lost, but I think the accent will remain alive for a long time. I hope so.
I know that life has taken you away to the south, to Glasgow, and you've now come back to settle in Perthshire, but do you feel as you go back there that Buchan is still the homeland?
Yes and no. the climate, the landscape, the feeling of the great skies and the clouds and the level land and the enormous expanse of fields that'll always be there, although they are a little bit changed from my time. And as long as you have your memory, you don't lose the place.
Yes.
You still remember the fields and the cry of the tuchets and the sounds of the larks and the look of things and Benahee away in the distance.
Yes, so that's the compromise that you've made in your life.
Compromise.
Yes. There is another thing that I remember that nobody else knows, in fact, that you and I were very nearly related because your brother Jimmy and my mother were at one time madly in love. And my mother used to tell the story of she was confronted one day by two young men in bicycles. One was Jimmy Campbell, your brother, and the other John Webster. And they wanted to know which one she was going to marry. And she married John Webster, and whenever they had a row after that, she used to cast up and say, "I can't find I should have married Jimmy Campbell," to which my father replied, "Aye, it's a damn pity you didn't." Yes, marry John Webster she did, and like everyone else, he bought his tobacco from Lizzie Allen, who kept her wee shop better than she kept her socialist tongue. Some vowed they wouldn't darken her door again, but they always did. For Lizzie was a brave soul. Both legs amputated in childhood, she powered her wheelchair through the dim paraffin light, arguing on any topic, by the end of which it was her opponent who didn't have a leg to stand on.
Take my tobacco, Lizzie.
Right you are. I see your friend Churchill says we're going to have a war.
Well, the way Hitler's going on, I believe he's right.
He's an old warmonger.
He'd be a damn sight more use than Chamberlain.
Aye, and Clem Attlee would be a damn sight more use than the both of them.
Aye, aye. Look, I'm hating about the mart now, Lizzie. Well, Loon's needing some sweeties. And then you can fill in his head with your blooming politics. He's coming home with some damn new idea good for Lizzie Allen.
I'm just completing his education, that's all.
Then I take a sweetie out of a jar. Lizzie's maybe been clawing her dope.
I heard that, John Webster. Now then, Jack. It's the black sugar straps that's your favourite.
I see the Tinkies are out in the market stands.
Ah, that'll be them on their way to Achy Fair.
What have Tinkies do, Miss Allen?
Oh, they roam the countryside, peddling their wares, just trying to scrape a living. It's a simple, nomadic life, but there's something very appealing about it.
Have they come here?
Oh, ever since I can remember.
What's changed about Mad since you were a wee while, Miss Allen?
Well, there were no damned motor cars to start with. Just the horse. And then the dairies. Used to be a lot more dairies, all keeping their few cows. Mary Lamb, Bob Wallace, Andrew Henry. Well, it was pleasant to watch them meandering along the village streets to the buyers. And then the housewives coming with pails for the milk, exchanging their bits of gossip.
Were there a lot more horses?
To see the farmers driving to Maud and Mart days. Perched high on the gig with lugged bonnet, passing with a cheery wave. And then later, if they overdid it on the business drams, a friend would head the horse for home and the wise beast would do the rest.
So I would leave Lizzie and watch the Tinkers head off towards Achy Fair with a crack of the whip and a swig of the Jill bottle. For a century or two, that Wednesday of July had brought the biggest horse market in the northeast, where animals sold off to the south came round the hill to be entrained at Maud, whinnying, rearing, and creating a frightful excitement. On the previous weekend, the showmen would come too, but the strictures of the Sabbath prevented them opening for the crowds who came to watch. Then in 1926, one bold fellow decided to test public reaction. As he opened up his merry-go-round, folk stood back lest they be seen to condone the ways of the devil. But the young, itching for a spin in the roundabout, soon cast caution to the wind, and thus in an instant, Achy Sunday was born. Since then, the funfair has raged, the music blared, pipers have squeezed at pigskin till the damn thing was forced to skirl for mercy. Hot-blooded evangelists have condemned this vulgar desecration with a fervour that was near orgasmic. They didn't leave Old Nick with a shadow of respectability, poor chap. As chairplanes birled and pipers skirled, I remembered one of the joys of our rural childhood. The appearance of the yellow motorbike and sidecar coming over the horizon from Peterhead. It was Louis Andre, whose Italian ice cream was sheer poetry to the palate. As well as his weekly visits, Louis was always at Achy Fair in the 30s. And 50 years later, he was still there. Now 88, he no longer makes ice cream, but he never misses an Achy Fair.
I've still got some snapshots of me aged 3 with a saucer and my penny waiting for Louis Andre to arrive for Peterhead.
For a copy.
For a copy, that's right. Sliders there.
Slider time. Well, we're countryside here, like.
But I keep telling people all over the world that the best ice cream that I ever tasted in my life was made by Louis Andre in Peterhead.
Well, it's made of a milk, you see.
No problem. Come on now.
Achy Fair was always a place for feats of strength and bold challenges. The great Benny Lynch was there in 1939, having recently been the flyweight champion of the world. But Benny was already on the road to down and out, reduced to 48 rounds with Freddie Tennant that day, sparring, bruising, brawling, a pathetic apology for the man who had been the national hero of Scotland.
5 pounds is a beer on him on it down. Come on!
Come on now, it's a bell ring and a quiet over here.
Lynch's blood is up, the chill of the night is on. Lynch's forcing Kane back with blows to the head and body. Kane is reeling. He can't hold out. It'll be a knockout. But
At
the
his
gong saves
peak,
him.
Benny was acclaimed as perhaps the greatest boxer that Britain had ever produced. And as folk made their way home from Achy that evening, he stood defiantly by the boxing booth, proclaiming that he would be back at the top as flyweight champion of the world.
So champion Benny Lynch holds his title, while 40,000 cheer the end of one of the greatest flyweight fights this country has ever seen.
But there was no way back for Benny. The bells were tolling for the wee man from the Gorbals, just as they sounded a knell for all mankind. For the sun that keeled over on Achy Brae that July evening of 1939 was casting a shadow that did more than stretch the lanky trees of Pitfour. It symbolised a man called Hitler, now looming as a threat on the horizon. So Buchan folk went home to milk the kye and bed down for an early start to the moss, there to cut the peat of winter's fuel. But with the morning light would come another world. Perhaps the omens were there to be seen in the darkening face of the old gypsy woman as she gazed into her crystal ball that day at Achy Fair on Achy Brae. Chamberlain had come back from Munich waving a bit of paper about peace in our time, but my father knew better. As sure as God made tatties, he said, there's going to be a war. And a war there was. On the day before it started, and in anticipation of German bombs, they cleared the children out of Glasgow. We were warned to expect a trainload from Downhill School, and my pal Norman and I were at the station.
It's a Spitfire.
On that same day, from doorways up and down our village, young men emerged with packs on their backs, territorials they called them, and said the train would be any time now. Excitement was in the air. At the station refresh, Lil and Lena handed out Jill bottles, and there were embarrassed farewells as painters and ploughmen, bakers and blacksmiths prepared for an adventure unknown. As the train steamed in from Glasgow, an alien culture descended upon our village innocence. Some gay, peely-welly-looking craters, and others bright and bouncy with freckles and pug noses that sometimes ran as fast as their feet, but already missing their bronchial backstreets.
Drop the others.
Hey, Jimmy, where's the flex? Flex? What's a flex? You know, big grable. Laurel Hardy. Oh, you mean the pictures? Aye, the pictures, the flex. You know. Oh, there's nae pictures in mud. Nae pictures in mud. Good, Sammy, what a dump. Where's the nearest flex then? I have to get to Peter Heath for that. Peter Heath? What doesn't Peter Heath? That'll be the jail, now, dude. Is there a tram car in Peter Heath? A tram car? Nothing, no, there's no tram cars in Maud. Well, how'd you get there? You just told Bernard's pussy. Oh, Miss McLaughlin, when's the car coming for us?
Wait a minute. Where's Nancy?
She's over there.
Oh, there you are, Nancy. Come along. This is your car. Now cheer up. You'll soon be there. There you are. That's it. That's fine. That's all for this car.
You got everyone! We've got the river Yugi. Beat the snowskins of Clyde. Well, I dinna ken about that, but it's a fair bit burny. We built ships in the Clyde, the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth. Well, we sail our boaties on the Yugi. We write songs about the Clyde. We write poetry about the Yugi. Bet you didn't. I would have. There I sat in the bugs to the Yugi, drinking water out to a juggy. Oh, you needn't laugh and I might give you an uppercut. So you're wanting a fight? Oh, I'm in no hurry. Just remember, my Dawkins, Benny Lynch. What, not a good, that'll do him.
Boys, behave yourselves. There's going to be enough war without you causing trouble. Now, shake hands and make up. We're all going to have to get along together. Glasgow children and Maud children alike. Now, come along, pick up your things.
Blue skies around the corner, walk round the corner with me. Just round the corner you'll see those blue skies. Blue skies, there's nothing warmer. Won't you feel happy to be sharing the sunshine with me under those blue skies? Troubles may come, but troubles will go. Don't you ever worry anymore. Look at those skies, they're not telling lies. That's what they will Europe was there for.
So those Glasgow evacuees came, some stayed and others went off back in time for the bombing they had come to escape. As that war wore on, the news came back that those young territorials who had gone off that September morning were mostly captured by Rommel at St. Valery or driven into the sea in the debacle of Dunkirk. Britain had faced her bleakest hour. Even Lizzie Allen in the wee shop had been forced to admit, however reluctantly, that Churchill had been right after all. By now, we had grown accustomed to the bombs and the blackout and the rationing, no cow candy or black sugar straps. We were almost immune to the air raid sirens, but not to the dreaded telegram delivered by Geordie Neal, the postie. But now there was a new spirit of optimism astirring. Hitler may have driven us off the beaches of France and conquered most of Europe, but the war had turned the corner. Montgomery was winning at Alamein, and one day we would return to those Normandy shores in what everyone was describing as the Second Front. Maud stirred again as 1,000 soldiers came rumbling into the village to prepare themselves for that final assault.
Hey, Jack, here's some soldiers. We better get doing. Hi, mister.
How you doing, lads? Okay?
Fine. Are you biding long in mud?
Oh, couple of months maybe.
What are you going to be doing here?
We're getting ready to meet Mr. Hitler, laddie. Are you coming with us?
Aye, I'd like that fine.
I think you're better at home, eh? What's your name, anyway?
Jackie Webster. What's yours?
I'm Jock Gray for Kelso, and these two scallywags here, this is Tommy Douglas for Hoyk, and this is Eddie Edwards for Edinburgh.
What are Marines for?
We're the 4th Battalion, see this here? Of the KOSB. That's the King's Own Scottish Borderers.
What's that in your sleeve there?
Well, this one here?
Aye.
That tells you I'm a pipe sergeant.
Have you a pipe band?
The best in the British Army. Blue bonnets are the border.
I'd like to play the pipes.
Well, you get to do a chanter then, and Jock here will teach you.
Well, yeah.
Aye, but you'll need to ask your father and mother first.
I'll run home and ask him now.
On yous go.
Three nips, please.
You'll be the new soldiers, are you?
Aye, that's right.
Well, my name's Jimmy Henry. You're welcome here any time.
How much is that?
Oh, yeah, that on the house.
Oh, very kind of you.
Well, I've a laddie in the army myself. In fact, he's just been taken prisoner.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Never mind. Here's hoping we'll release him and have him back to you real soon, eh?
Aye, okay.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers.
You not getting a war to sort out Hitler?
Aye, well, that's what we're training for.
When you get hold of him, would you do something on my behalf?
What's that?
Will you give the bugger a quick kick in the ass for me?
I will do that, fella. So, what'd your laddie do for the war?
He worked here in the hotel, and he was a football player as well. Aye. Goalkeeper for Maud, and he was just signing for Aberdeen.
The Dons, eh? No a bad team.
Davy Halliday, the manager, had high hopes for Jimmy.
Never mind, he'll be back at Pittodrie soon. Right, we better be pushing on. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, thank you.
Hello.
Mama says I can learn to play the pipes, and will you come to your tea on Sunday?
Oh, smashing. That's very kind of her. So, we'll see you on Sunday, eh?
Aye.
cheerio.
Cheerio.
Cheerio. See you, laddie.
Jock taught me to play the pipes all right. I marched alongside my heroes and broke my little heart when they finally stepped out on the road to D-Day, some never to return from battle. And more than 40 years later, I still attend their reunions where I'm greeted as the Wheeloon Fimad. But life in the village went on, and here I am back at Maud's school by the route I first took in April of 1936. As country bairns, we live by the rotations of the land, and just as the crops were sown in spring, so did a fresh crop of the human flesh go fleet-footed to the excitements of Miss Cato's infant class, where the wonders of the world began to unfold themselves.
Yes, that's right, yes. Mr. Wilson.
In time, we would no doubt grow to take our place in life. The reigning headmistress, in fact, is Gina Walker, a Maud Quine who was a pupil here in my own day. As we step inside a classroom, how weird that I am gazed upon as a stranger in a place where no one has ever been more at home. For this was my domain. I can still smell the plasticine and the chalk, the rubber and fresh exercise books, and Miss Cato's caramel on a Friday afternoon. There were simple days, simple tastes, lullabies, and the tender stirrings of love. We sang and danced, and oh yes, I conducted the school's percussion band, or was it the concussion band?
How many sugars in your coffee do you need, Jack?
I'll take 2, Gina, please, and some milk. That's all right. You and I were at Maud School at the same time, Gina. I'm a bit older than you, obviously. But then you came back as headmistress. Now, that must have been a strange experience. How did you find that?
Well, it's marvellous in a way because I know all the children. And of course, being at school with lots of the parents as well, it makes things very friendly.
My early memory of Maud, Gina, is the infant of the class, Miss Cato, and her warm welcome. And I remember the warmth of her room, the fire,
the fireplace,
the
yes.
cocoa for the country bairns at dinner time,
yes.
and her caramel on Friday afternoon.
That's right, and we used to put all our wet gloves and bonnets and everything along the front of the fire to dry.
The guardrail.
That's right.
That's right. It was a warm, reassuring start in life. Did the kids still need that kind of reassurance in life?
Yes. Oh, yes, they do.
Yes, they're no more sophisticated than we were.
None at all, no. And they still think that their first teacher is always their best teacher.
Yes, there is.
Oh, yes, yes.
Of course, the war cut across our childhood, you know, the evacuees arriving from Glasgow and the soldiers coming to be billeted in the village. Do you remember much about that?
Oh, yes, we had marvellous fun when the soldiers came. My mother went on a Sunday night to the Naffy up in the Pleasure Park.
In the Pleasure Park,
and I remember her coming home one day saying that she'd seen some young lads who'd come in and they looked terribly lost. And she said to one of them, well, if you have a night out, you know, you can come to the house and just spend the evening with us. And later on in the week, the doorbell rang. And of course, having no street lights, you see, Mother went to the door to peer out to see who was there. And she said there was a line from the door right to the gate. And her first thought was, oh, I wonder if I've got enough in the house to feed all that.
Well, sugar for a start.
Exactly. But she said, whoever came, it was like feeding the 5,000.
Yes.
There was always plenty for them, and always something left behind.
A extremely good time.
I know.
And it brought more to lives that had never been before.
Yes,
yes. And it's never been since
I know.
It'll be
and I often wonder why Maud was chosen.
Yes.
Because, I mean, when you mention Maud to anybody nowadays, they say, Maud? Where's that?
Where's Maud? Nobody seems to care for Maud.
Nobody knows.
Yes.
Nobody knows.
But we could have told them where Maud was. Why? It was the centre of the universe. Well, our universe. And everything else was relative. Aberdeen lay 28 miles to the south, Peterhead 14 miles to the east, and Fraserburgh, or the Broch as we knew it, was 15 to the north. And it was here, to the Broch beach, surely one of nature's finest, that we used to come for our Maud School picnics in the 30s. And what an adventure that was. Down we came by train to spill out on this vast expanse of golden sand which stretches round to Inverallaghy. And here we ran our races, built our sandcastles, waded cautiously into the sea, and devoured our braddies and coloured cakes. But once again, it was Hitler who would soon put a stop to all that. The fisher folk were our neighbours, and yet they were a different breed. But if we didn't fully understand them, we never failed to admire the courage which sent men down to the sea in little ships. The courage, too, of wives and families who waited and worried, knowing that those friendly waters which lapped the doorstep at the sunset glow of a still evening could just as soon whip up a furious flood tide of sorrow. So they were more aware of their Maker than country folk, and heaven knows they needed all the faith they could muster. One day in 1940, my father came home and said he had broken a personal rule. He did business with farmers that day in a pub in Fraserburgh, the Commercial. As he spoke, we saw a glow in the sky. Benzie and Miller's shop was on fire. Soon the German bombers were diverted from the Forth Bridge. Over they came. We heard the thud. A high explosive struck that same Commercial bar which stood right here. There were 31 dead. But then the Brochers are no strangers to tragedy. In the early 50s, I was the Present Journal reporter in Fraserburgh and had just reported on the worst gales in living memory in the January of Coronation year. 9 days later, the skies were clear and spring-like with a few lingering wisps of cloud. But away out there, the great North Sea still churned in anger and sent its warning waves to the Buchan coast. A few yawls had gone out that morning, but found themselves in difficulty, so the lifeboat was called to shepherd them home. Fraserburgh was having its after-lunch nap when suddenly the cry went up, "The lifeboat's over!" The whole town ran to the foreshore. They had lost a lifeboat before and would do so again, and now their eyes were cast anxiously here on the harbour bar, where, in the mockery of a sunny day, a freak wave had indeed caught the lifeboat and turned it upside down. The 7 men trapped inside tried to swim down and out. Charlie Tate made it, but his father didn't. Then we saw the coxswain, Andrew Ritchie, still alive, thrashing his way towards a wife and young family. No one dared jump into the angry sea to help, but the crowd cheered, "Come on, Andrew, come on!" Andrew swam in response. Then up came a piece of flotsam and struck the last ounce of strength from his body. A brave man went under for the last time. They do have to battle against all the odds in that sturdy land of Buchan. Among the enduring landmarks of local life is the annual New Deer Agricultural Show, held at the height of summer. Summer? Well, it was raining cats and dogs, aye, and bullocks and heifers and sheep as well. I've seldom known a dale like it. But then folks said it wouldn't have been New Deer's show without the rain. And there, as I ploitered through the dubs, I was thinking about my father, John Webster, who, as the local auctioneer, served this show year after year as the man in the microphone, or the megaphone as it was. How often I seem to remember him coming home and saying to my mother, "Lord, wife, the water was running down the back of my neck and out there some bricks." But in his jovial way, he soldiered on, as indeed the organisers at New Deer today soldiered on. Lesser mortals would have abandoned this cascading farce and taken to the tarpaulins, but not the folk of Buchan. Long generations of chavin against a grudging soil, of pulling neeps in the fiery frosts of winter, have hardened them to all the meteorological muck the skies can shide them. So they put on a brave show, judged their Charlies and Frisians, goats and gimmers. Those pampered champions still managed to pose and preen themselves on so devilish a day. And solid Buchan farmers stood their ground in plain defiance of the uncharitable gods.
Hey, hey, hey. That's fine.
With the Glar now well on to knee-deep in the showground, they cancelled the parade of livestock. But the people took it all so philosophically. The beasts, well, they prepared for home, and some were in more of a hurry than others. In a spirit of abandon, the folk decided just to enjoy themselves. On board the pageant lorries, they were singing and dancing in the deluge. If Noah had come along with his ark as a competitor, he would surely have won first prize. So they paraded their pageant, down the dram, and danced into the night. For that's the kind of folk I grew up with.
And the fifth was the Stricken Girl Guides. So that's the official result anyway now from our judge, Ian Smith, in our pageant.
That showground where once my father's voice would have boomed out a colourful comment about a day like this lies just below the kirkyard of Culsh. No visit to this corner could pass without a call at this high point of the parish landscape where, ice-cold and still, now lie the two who once found warmth and joy in my conception. Wherever did the laughter go? From there in Culsh, I find myself on these visits to Buchan gravitating down through Maud to the historic Abbey of Deer. Folk pass its gates and never give it a thought, but here, wandering alone, I find great peace. They used to hold a parade like this in my childhood, soon after the Roman Catholic Church had regained access to the ancient place. Well, once a year, the Buchan train stopped at a wooden platform nearby and disgorged a teeming array of monks, priests and bishops in mitre headgear, gaping jaws to the heavens, moving off in a prayerful wail of incantation which aroused a tingle of fear in the child breast. I would watch from an elevated house opposite the main gate, which belonged to my mother's cousin, Anna Ritchie, and there we would freeze into silence.
Going to these walls is to walk back into history. Is to be reminded of this place as a spiritual center, as an oasis, as a house of prayer, as a place from which men went out to serve the people of Buchan. And the origin of this particular abbey must be traced back to geographical terms, to France, Burden in particular, and in historical terms to the 11th and 12th centuries.
Those people of Buchan are now mainly Protestant, but there's no room for religious conflict in a place like this. They have all come together today, each respecting the views and rights of the other, and their common bond may be their Christianity or just the fact that they are neighbours in the community. And the sun has shone upon them.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
In this meander through one man's life, I had come at last to the spiritual heart of Buchan. This ruined abbey had been here for more than 800 years, but its predecessor, just down the road at Old Deer, was founded another 600 years before that by St. Drostin and St. Columba, who brought their mission to Buchan. Those monasteries were the local inns of their day, the safest place for a traveller to seek a bed at a time when the highway robbers had nothing to learn from the muggers of today. So there was a vibrant community here all those centuries ago. Across those rolling fields of Buchan, generations rise and pass away, each in its time claiming right to the land it tills, gleaning the oats of the brose bowl, skimming the brie of the barley, a grain of truth that seeps into the soul of mankind. And through all the change, time itself would seem to stand still over this place of peace. We may pay little heed, but there is an eternal voice to be heard out there. You can hear it in the wailing of the wind and in the waters of the Yugi as they warble their way past this abbey, down through the garden of Buchan and onwards to Peterhead and the great North Sea beyond. It's a voice which is there for all who care to pause, to listen and to wonder.
Literally 50 years ago, in 1937, was the last time that my brothers and I participated in the races at the picnics. Every other year, from the time I was 7 years old, we used to come back to Scotland. My father not only never forgot his roots, he was very proud of his roots, and he thoroughly enjoyed coming back. He looked forward to it. It was one of the more meaningful things in his life. And
Well did I remember those visits of Bertie the father.